Strife. Endless spirit of timeless unrest.
I wonder if it was some kind of test to see how far
You should try asking some questions once in a while. Quit playing the good little soldier.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. As the title suggests, I'm me talking about how I would make a Strife video game, or how they should. Strife is one of my favorite characters. He's the rider of the White Horse, the only character in the Darksiders franchise that really hasn't received his own video game. And before anyone says it in the comments, no, Darksiders Genesis does not count, so don't bring it up. But I do believe that a lot of things that they added in Genesis could make their way into a Strife video game all on its own, especially considering things that he brings up to war in that game, with him actually questioning the council and their motives.
Convinced. The Nephilim are wrong attacking Eden. I get it. But Annihilation? Come on. The council messed up.
I wonder if it was some kind of test to see how far the council could push us.
Why must you always question? You should try asking some questions once in a while. Quit playing the good little soldier.
And I actually believe they used Genesis as setup for what they will do for Strife with his own mainline game, considering the fact that his shadow has been felt throughout the entirety of the franchise, with both of his brothers, Death and War, receiving both of his pistols at two separate occasions. And in disguise, Strife actually helped out his sister in Darksiders 3, and with what he preaches to her at the end, it actually makes it seem like he went through his own separate arc at a certain point. And I do believe that it was kind of hinted at with what they said at the beginning of Darksiders 3, with the Shard Council saying that Strife attends to other matters. And that line was always peculiar to me, considering that Genesis actually set up the fact that Strife was a killer way before he was a horseman. And like Death, he has a very dark past, and he also regrets what they did in Eden. And with all those facts aside, it actually brings up an interesting idea for a story for Strife, going with a certain aspect of his character, just like the other Darksiders games. With every mainline Darksiders game besides Genesis, for each horseman there was a particular arc that related to the core aspect of them as a horseman. For War, his arc related to War in a very unique way, but it also related to the idea of clearing his name and finding out who started the end war, ending the game actually starting the apocalypse. With Death's arc, obviously it related to the idea of clearing his brother's name, but also restoring humanity, bringing life, but also facing the sins of his past and his killing of the Nephilim, and also Absalom. With Fury, she changes as a character, facing the 7 deadly sins, which was her main goal, but also realizing that she embodies the 7 deadly sins as well, and also finding a new purpose in protecting humanity, realizing that there was a conspiracy to set up the Horsemen. If you notice a pattern with each particular story, it relates to the core aspect of each horseman: War, Death, and Fury, which are pretty self-explanatory on what they mean and also how they relate to each horseman. But what about Strife? On a story front and also on a character front, what does the word Strife mean? Well, in the games, when the council were describing each horseman, when they described Strife, they described him as
Strife. Endless spirit of timeless unrest. You are all that is unsettled in the hearts of that which lives
and breathes, which describes the idea of quickness and also someone that is feared, in the same way that they describe John Wick in the John Wick movies. But what does the word Strife actually mean at its core, and how could they relate that to a story? The word Strife actually means angry or bitter disagreement over fundamental issues and conflict, which is a fact that they really set up fairly well in Darksiders Genesis with him questioning the council, and I believe that they could probably expand on that in his own narrative. And I believe for his own particular story, you could actually explore the dark aspects of Strife's past and also relate it to the idea of him questioning the council, especially building on the fact that him and War were fairly close, that they set up fairly well in Darksiders Genesis. And I believe he would be the first one to know that the council was probably up to something and try to prove War's innocence. But I also believe it makes perfect sense considering what he said and preaches to Fury in Darksiders 3 as well. With all of those facts aside, it actually brings up a perfect story to tell for the character of Strife. And that brings us to the story section of this game and what they could do. One that deals with the sins of his past and also his confliction when it comes to working for the council, but it also could end on a tragic note like Darksiders 3 with Strife confronting the council and it is revealed how evil they really are, and also they released the 7 Deadly Sins to set up Fury in 3 as a cover-up where Strife goes into hiding amongst the humans, and then you get to Darksiders 3, which connects the dots between each game. But like the 7 Deadly Sins, there has to be a main villain for the Strife game, and there are a lot of potential candidates for who could be the main villains of this game for Strife's story, in the same vein as Absalom or the 7 Deadly Sins. And outside of the council, there are particularly 3 that come to mind. The most obvious is an Absalom-like character that is a sin from Strife's past that he has to conquer throughout the story, just like in Darksiders 2. As for who that could be, I have no idea. As for another potential candidate for a villain, you obviously have Lilith, which obviously would make sense considering the fact that she is the mother of the Nephilim, and also she's a partial instigator of the apocalypse. Plus, considering that the council is no stranger to shifting blame, it would make sense to make her the so-called main villain or antagonist of the game, but not have her be defeated to where you can build her up for Darksiders 5. Final one would probably be Samael or obviously Vulgrim, or maybe an angel, which is obvious. But if we don't get a Darksiders 5, obviously this whole prequel story idea doesn't really work completely, because you obviously want to play as all 4 of the horsemen this time around, and conclude the story that was built up through these previous games. So if a prequel story is not on the table, what could they really do? That's where a Devil May Cry 5 or Bayonetta story structure could probably work, where it is still a prequel telling what happened to Strife throughout these certain bits, but you also conclude the story as well with the idea of playing as the rest of the horsemen and finishing things up. Because in Devil May Cry 5, obviously you have it to where events happen at key points, so you're jumping from the past to the present to the future and expanding on different key plot lines and kind of intertwining them at every key point. With Bayonetta's, it was very similar in aspect, at least with Bayonetta 1. So obviously, if we're not going to get a Darksiders 5, the story structure could probably give us a prequel and also a sequel at the same time, where you do explore what happened to Strife in the timeline, but you're also expanding on the future events of the Horsemen going against the Council and Lucifer and all the other demons. So those are the 2 routes that they can go for a story structure when it comes to a Strife game, but what about the gameplay? When it comes to the idea of Strife's gameplay, we did get a good overall concept of what it could be like from Darksiders Genesis. Strife being a ranged character compared to his brothers and sister, he also has 2 twin swords that he can use and dual wield in combat for quick close encounter attacks, and also the ability to use different ammo types, which are all pretty interesting when it comes to his overall gameplay. But what could it be like in motion? I think a lot of people want the particular Darksiders formula that we all know and love when it comes to dungeons and a more hack and slash style, because Darksiders gameplay does take a lot of influence from different genres, which in and in itself is not a bad thing, but I do believe a lot of people want the Strife game to go back to its more hack and slash roots. A lot of people suggested for Strife's game to be a first-person shooter, and thoughts and a lot of other people's thoughts on that subject is, for the love of God, Gunfire, don't do this. Don't make Strife's gameplay just like a Doom or Call of Duty Darksiders fusion. Nobody wants that. There is a concept of what this could actually look like, and which in and itself does look pretty interesting, and I will link the artist in the description because I'll be showing that on screen. Even if I disagree with the style of gameplay, I do think it's a pretty cool approach. But I do believe that there is different genres that they could actually pull from to fit Strife as a character and also go with the Darksiders formula. Obviously, Strife is a shooter and he's also a ranged character, which is a big reason why a lot of people were suggesting first person, but there are hack and slashes that do evolve around guns and also long range combat as well. And there are hack and slash characters with movesets built around that concept, like Lady from Devil May Cry. So with that in mind, actually Strife's gameplay should take a lot of influence from Halo, Bayonetta, Jedi Survivor and Fallen Order, and also Devil May Cry, and also the previous Darksiders games. And obviously including Genesis as a central pillar of the concept of his gameplay, there would be a little bit of Ninja Gaiden influence, but it would be fairly small. His gameplay would prioritize that long-range style because he is a shooter, but it also would kind of revolve around dodging and timing as well. Pulling a little bit from Darksiders Genesis, you would have different unlockable types of bullets that you can use on enemies, and also also different styles of weapons, just like in Darksiders 2 and Darksiders 1 with your secondary weapons. And like Dante, you would have two different sets of secondary weapons, swappable guns and also swappable melee weapons. Kind of similar to what they did in Darksiders 2 with the idea of death, but kind of making it more Devil May Cry and Bayonetta inspired. Where Strife's gameplay would be a little bit about range and also distance, where it'd be about timing your dodges, and also you can go in for devastating close range attacks at certain key points, and also balancing your ammo and other various stuff. Pulling a little bit from the core concept of Darksiders Genesis, obviously you would have secondary types of bullets that you could swap out and use with your guns, because just like in Genesis, they are a resource that you can run out of, but also you have to strategize how you could use them in combat for different types of demons and also enemies, because some of them would be better used for this enemy, but if you don't have that key bullet unlocked, you're pretty much screwed, because there is a sense of strategy in how you use your secondary guns and also bullets in combat. Obviously, your melee weapons are just as effective, so getting in close at some key points is pretty cool. But because Strife is a character that uses and relies on guns and actually works best from a distance, close range is not always the best option, but it is very effective as well, and so you're not relying on your guns completely. So it's a balancing act of how you use your guns, but also your melee weapons for key points, because certain enemies rely more on using your melee weapons for here and also opening them up for gun attacks, or vice versa. So it's basically using a different strategy for key enemies. It makes combat a balancing act of using your range and also your close range, with your guns and also your melee weapons being effective in many ways, where you cannot rely on one or the other. It's a balancing act, and that's something that's really going to show in the combat. And like Bayonetta, you do have this sense of timing your dodges as well to get around key enemies and gain a distance, very similar to what they tried to do with Darksiders 3. That game system was inspired by Dark Souls. This would be inspired by different dodging systems of hack and slashes like Bayonetta and also Ninja Gaiden, and also the dodging system of Nero from Devil May Cry, where if you do time your dodges and not just roll out of the way like what they had in Darksiders Genesis, I want to expand on that dodging system where it would prioritize more distance level dodging, where you do perfect dodges. You can either gain a distance to go for devastating close range attacks like they did in Darksiders 3, or gain a distance and actually use devastating long range attacks. Where precision is a primary focus in Strife's gameplay, it actually works its way throughout every aspect of his gameplay, even the hack and slash elements. Just like in Darksiders 2 and 1, there would be a little bit of air combat, also air finishers, and also ground finishers as well, but there would be unique attacks when it comes to gun finishers and also melee weapon finishers. Just like War and Death, obviously Strife would have access to different various weapons and other gadgets that he can use, not just in combat, but also for puzzles. So stuff like the Void Bomb from Darksiders Genesis and maybe a couple other things I would probably bring back, but also expand on it by giving him new gadgets and other various stuff as well. Well, this is all I got for my ideas for Strife's game. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see what THQ Nordic and also Gunfiregames come up with for the next Darksiders game, inevitably sometime soon. Let me know whether you agree, disagree, or how would you do a Strife video game. Let me know all of that in the comments down below, and also make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and also hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload. And share this video around. It actually does help out the channel and me, and I know you guys hear that a lot, but it does, because the YouTube algorithm sucks. And subscribe, it really does help. And check out all the links in the description and all that jazz. Have a good rest of your day, morning, afternoon, night, or whatever it is for you in the world, and peace out. Bye-bye.